Hello, everyone.
Hello. Welcome.
So today is a little bit different, and but we're really excited. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're doing a live with our friend and colleague, DeVon Mills, and we're going to have a really awesome topic here. It's on trust. Mm-hmm. If you haven't seen us posting about it.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, and we are just so delighted to have you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for letting me say how much I love what you guys are doing.
Aw, thanks. It's a privilege to have you with us. We originally became connected with Dr. DeVon Mills a few years ago when we would come together at meetings and faculty gatherings for Wilson University.
Yes.
And Dr. DeVon Mills serves as the secretary for the board of directors at Wilson, and we teach for Wilson. So that's kind of where we connected. Yes. And we have just been honored to be in your presence ever since.
You're serious.
Thank you. So we want to introduce Dr. Mills and tell you a little bit about his background, and we'll jump right into our topic on trust and forgiveness.
Yes.
So he's a marriage and family therapist in Atlanta, Georgia, and a pastor in Lawrenceville, Georgia. Tell us a little bit about your practice and a little bit about your church.
So our church, I'll start with it.
Yeah.
We have a wonderful church. It was a church plant that was started in 2002 by one of my closest friends. We're only the second pastor, and we are in the most culturally diverse county in Atlanta. And so out of about 100 people, we have 14 countries of origin. So this wonderful multicultural church.
Yeah.
That we absolutely love being a part of. We love our church family.
That's awesome.
And it's the center of our life. And then my practice is in Atlanta. I kind of put it at the midpoint. I teach at a graduate university for counseling. And so I put my office kind of at the midpoint where I can get there on the way to work or on the way home.
Nice.
And I work primarily with adult male survivors, childhood sexual abuse, other types of trauma. Then I do a lot of sex addictions work, and then couples work, and the final thing is I do a little bit of anxiety disorder work.
Okay.
So that's kind of what it's all a lot, but it all kind of ties together.
It does.
It's a pretty centralized theme there. So.
Oh, that's awesome. And so in your work with each of those populations, would you say that the concept of trust comes up quite a bit?
In all of them.
Right.
In all of them. If I'm working with an individual that recovering from childhood trauma, it's how do we trust that the next person won't leave me, the next person won't hurt me. If it's someone with addiction, it's how do I trust that if you ask me to stop doing this one thing that has worked for me to keep me from having to confront emotions and anxieties. How do I trust you that what you're telling me is going to work? If I'm working with couples, how do I trust that this is not going to happen again? So trust is kind of fundamental to everything we do. Even so much so that, like, if we go just hardcore research, the therapeutic relationship, the client being able to trust me is the key to us having a positive outcome for the client. So trust is fundamental. Just sitting in the room regardless of what we're talking about.
Absolutely.
That's good.
Yeah. Now you have a couple of certificates. You have a master's degree in counseling and therapy. You have a PhD in counselor education and supervision. Now your certificates that you have are in sex therapy and trauma counseling. Did you get a lot of training when it comes to like trust, affairs, and especially in the trauma work that you did? Yeah,
the trauma work focuses more and was really intentional about how do you build trust with someone who's been traumatized, and they're probably coming in with the defense mechanism is that I'm not going to trust anyone. And so there's a lot of just how do you work through being trustworthy and helping someone become comfortable. And then the sex therapy was really, it covered the full thing from like human sexuality to affair recovery, sexual addictions. And so the two kind of married together really well. Yeah. And for my purpose, it was how to deal with sexual trauma survivors. But again, trust is the fundamental thing. If someone can't trust me to feel safe in the room with me, we're not going to get anywhere.
That's true. Right. Yeah. Wow. So we are going to jump right in
Okay.
to the topics
ready.
for today. You guys submitted well over 80 questions, and
So we have plenty of fodder and
Yes.
questions to ask.
Lots of material.
yes. All right. So we like to cite this statistic when we're talking about rebuilding trust, and that's that 80% of people who seek help after a breach in the relationship actually do recover.
Yes.
And so that's what we want to just kick off with, is by saying, if you've had a breach in a relationship, whether it's in your marriage or in any other type of relationship, and we want to broaden our discussion to a lot of different types of relationships
Yes.
today.
Right.
But there is hope in recovering and healing and rebuilding trust.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's assuming, because one of the biggest questions, or one of the questions we get most often, is once there is an affair or a massive breach, is it possible to repair, to get back? And they want to say, well, can we get back to where we were before? And kind of a trick
Yeah,
question.
that is a trick question.
But and I don't know if we want to go there yet. You want to cover where we're going?
Yeah,
with
so
our topics.
should we just do an overview of the questions
Sure,
first?
let's do that.
Okay. All right. So we're going to cover what is trust, how is it different from forgiveness, what is betrayal, and then we'll talk about some of the most common situations that you see when trust is broken. And then we'll talk about repeated offenses and how that impacts the trust building process, the trust rebuilding process. And then trust also in the context of the premarital couple. So when you're learning to build trust for the first time and get to know somebody, especially in a long distance relationship.
Yeah.
We had a few questions from premarital couples that came in. The scriptural context of forgiveness. The scars of the past, like traumatic experiences and how that impacts trust. How to heal when only one person wants to work on it. And then by far and large, the most common question that we got had to do with, how do I actually forgive? How do I move forward, rebuild trust? What does that look like? What are the steps?
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we're headed today. And then we'll have Q&A if you guys want to jump in at any point. I have another phone over here. We'll be monitoring the questions.
Do our best to answer.
Yeah, so feel free to jump in with your questions, and we'll field those as they come in.
So maybe let's just get started off on a base understanding.
Okay.
What is trust, and why is it necessary?
So I'm going to give you my definition of trust.
Okay.
I don't know that you would find this in a dictionary. I think it would be the assumption that what you're telling me is the truth. That if you tell me you're at the store, you're at the store.
Right.
And it's kind of this, we start off with this principle of, I have no reason to question. And so it's just what you say you're going to do, you're going to do. And there's no indicators that I need to question that.
Right. And so then, if there's no indicators and then something happens, we call that the betrayal, or like, how would you?
I think that's the thing that is so difficult is, yes, I think when some of the earlier questions that came in when I started looking through them, you sent me the first few, I was really surprised because being a marriage and family therapist, my mind pretty much goes directly to infidelity. And there were a significant number of questions that didn't have anything to do with infidelity.
Right.
But people felt truly betrayed and that trust had been broken and that they were in a relationship that was not trustworthy.
Yeah.
And then some was like their kids. How do we do this with our children? And, so I think for me, it was a little bit of perspective taking of just like, wow, trust is a lot broader than I've been thinking through my lens as a marriage and family therapist.
Yeah, that's good.
So I guess to answer the question, I think it starts with like tiny little fissures that grow into larger cracks in the foundation.
Yeah.
And so they don't feel big at first. And then when something major happens, looking back and realizing, oh wow, like there were a lot of indicators that there were some things that I was either choosing to overlook, or it wasn't worth the fight to engage in those conversations. And now, how do we fix this really, really big foundation problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Yeah. What would you say are the most common situations that you see in which trust is broken?
So in a clinical sense, I would say it would be with issues of fidelity, and they would be probably equally balanced between a spouse finding out that their partner, and this is pretty stereotypical and falls along lines that we would think of a wife finding out that the husband has a pornography problem, or in premarital, somewhere along the way, the boyfriend disclosing or just getting caught, and so someone's getting ready to get married, and they've all of a sudden discovered, hey, my fiance, my boyfriend's been watching pornography for a decade or 2 decades or whatever the case may be. So there's a lot of what does it look like to trust that it's just pornography, that the pornography will end, that we really can't get past that. And then there's an equal amount of someone has actually had an affair. And surprisingly, I can say, and there's a good bit of research that would stand by this, but I've really seen where it's probably almost 50-50 between men having affairs and women having affairs. And I think the perception is that men have more affairs. And I don't think that is what I've seen played out. I've seen it with pornography, definitely more men than women, though that's shifting.
Shifting with the younger generation.
Yes,
right?
very much.
Exactly.
But I'm seeing an equal number of couples where the wife has been the one to have the affair.
So given your experience, because this is a good moment to talk about this since we're on it, are you seeing that it's a big issue? Pornography is a big issue within our movement, or?
Yes. Pornography is such a big issue that I shifted a number of years ago, my first year in practice even, away from has there been any pornography use or do you watch pornography to tell me about your pornography use. And I've never got 0 for an answer. That's
surprising.
I've got a lot of I had a problem, and they can like really talk through like how they quit and their accountability and those things. So I've got a lot of people that have worked really hard to quit before they ever come see me.
Sure.
But I truly can say I've never had anyone that
had zero
exposure to it. And so it's pervasive. I think one of the interesting things, and it would be interesting, I don't know how the questions would break down, the researcher part of my brain, one thing I've seen, I'm such a champion of the millennial generation for this purpose here, is I'm Gen X. So what I see typically is men or couples from Gen X showing up in my office when they've been caught.
Okay.
And they need me to try to help them salvage.
Okay.
With the millennial generation, this is consistently what I see, are young men in their mid-20s to late 20s coming in saying, hey, I've been watching pornography, I've been acting out behaviorally for all of these years, and I'm really wanting to focus on building a relationship, getting into a relationship, getting married, and I don't want to take these things into marriage.
Wow.
Can you help me get healthy?
Wow. So they're a lot more assertive with...
They're much more assertive, and I think much more courageous, because it takes so much courage to come in and say, hey, this is the messy part of my life that no one knows about, versus someone coming in and saying, like, here's all the messy parts of my life that got exposed. Can you fix it, please? Yeah. And so I think that's an interesting shift with that's happened over time.
Yeah.
Since we're kind of on trying to repair things too, with trust and forgiveness, how do you go about, what would be maybe a process, and I don't know if we're moving ahead, but what would be the process that you would take with maybe someone that's been exposed or been found out that they've been watching and they're like, how do I trust you again? What's the process that you would take someone through to help them, come back to health?
So the first thing I always assess for, we'll make the assumption we're talking with couples, about couples.
Yeah, good.
So if it's a couple and I just have the man in the room, or if it's the two of them, I always want to find out first, do you want to quit? Mm-hmm. Is this like the marital version of mandated therapy? Like when you get court mandated clients?
Yeah.
Is this marital mandated therapy, or do you actually want to stop? Mm-hmm. Because if you only want to stop for him or her, this is not going to work.
Yeah.
Like you're going to find ways around anything we put into place. But if you want to stop, whether your marriage survives or doesn't survive, the dating relationship survives or doesn't survive, we can stop. And once we get that settled, we can move ahead. And when I ask that question, I've been surprised at how introspective people are willing to be, and people saying, no, I'm totally doing this for the marriage or for the relationship. And I'm just pretty forthright with, like, it's not going to work. Yeah. Like, you can probably stop for 6 months, a year, but
it's not sustainable.
It's not sustainable because you don't want to quit for yourself. Like, you don't see the need.
Yeah.
So that's key is in rebuilding trust is, do you want to rebuild trust, and do you want to stop the behavior that created the breach in trust?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, on that note, there was a question that came in a few different ways, this same question. How does someone heal for the person who is hurt? How does someone heal when only one person wants to work on it, or maybe their spouse doesn't want to stop their behavior?
That is such a difficult situation. And it's not a simple answer, because these are the things we don't like to look at. We want to have this kind of indignant, like, have more respect for yourself, leave, stand up for yourself. But what does it look like for, say, someone who chose to be a stay-at-home mom and hasn't worked in the last 8 to 10 years and has 2 or 3 children, or doesn't have children? What does it look like to suddenly need to support yourself? Do you have the ability to go out and get a job? Does this mean your children have to change school districts? Sure. And so it's not as simple as, just get some self-respect and a backbone. It trickles down into, like, can you put food on the table?
Right. Yeah. And the fear of stepping out when they haven't had that experience, haven't been working, like you're saying, that would hold them back.
And then just innate in all of this is the damage it does to one's self-worth when they're with a partner who has either had affairs or watched pornography or been engaged in texting, sending inappropriate pictures, an inappropriate relationship with a work colleague, whether it's male or female. The damage that does to the partner creates so much self-doubt that there's just a lot of time not enough feeling of, like, well, I'm not even capable of moving on because I wasn't aware enough to even realize this was going on. Like, there's so many unspoken messages that come with a break and a breach of trust, particularly if it deals with anything where someone else has moved into that spot of intimacy, that it's really, really, we have to deal with self-worth and then the practicalities of things. The reality is, until both people want to work on it, we're not going to see things get healthy. We can go, like, really contractual and say we're going to make sure the kids have a good upbringing and they don't realize there's chaos in the home, but there's not going to be a healthy relationship.
Right. Yeah.
And that's really sad. And unfortunately, that is where some people find themselves actually having to spend some time until the other person either wants to change or they gather the courage to do something different.
And during that interim, is there a practical step that they can take to work on that identity piece?
Yes. Again, this is one of those hard questions because I usually get a lot of pushback about this statement. So if we're talking about affairs or pornography, I've never seen an affair or a pornography addiction actually be about the sex. It's always about something else. And the sex is just part of everything that goes on. And so we can say it and it can be true, but to say it's not about you, it's about them, those are true words, but that's very hard for someone to absorb and believe.
Yeah.
And so it's really, I think, what I try to do is center in on how do we help someone begin to believe that, hey, it really isn't about me.
Yeah.
I didn't choose to make that breach of our vows. Yeah. And so that's really difficult to do. And then I always try to take, and would probably lean more toward like a domestic violence or intimate partner violence type thing, but I always try to start saying, okay, what resources do we have?
Okay.
Because so many people, where they're trapped in that situation where they want to make it work, or the other person's just clearly sending the signals of, I'm not changing and I'm not leaving if you're willing to put up with it. The person begins to feel like they don't have options. And so I try to really lean in and say, okay, what are your options?
That's empowering.
Yeah. Like, do you have an education? Can you get an education? What could you do? Who are your resources? Who could you depend on? Who could help you here? And I try to keep a running list of agencies, resources, ministries for people
to empower them,
and connect them with other groups of people who have been through things, and say, hey, just go to this group, hear other people's stories.
Yeah, just that support can be helpful in processing their identity issue.
And helping them know that they're not alone, like they're not the sole case in the world that's dealing
you're not
with
the only person this has ever happened to.
Yeah, I think the statistic on how prevalent a breach in trust is, like an affair or pornography, it's 1 in every 3 married couples. It's either one or both spouses that have breached the trust. Yeah. So it's super prevalent.
It's really, really prevalent. And with pornography, I have a colleague who's she's younger than me. She's in her late 20s. And we were doing supervision with a supervisor one day, and she was visibly upset, and she said, I'm really, really sad because I'm 28 and my work has really jaded me because I don't know that there's a man out there to marry that I'm not going to have to really say, hey, do you have a pornography problem? Like, tell me about your sexual history, because she said, I think it's such a prevalent problem that it's really narrowed down.
Yeah. What are some practical tips for people that are struggling with that, with the pornography problem, or their spouses dealing with that? How do they stop? And then maybe we could get into healing the relationship in a second. But how does a spouse help help them stop?
So I think where a lot of couples get into dangerous territory is they try to make their spouse their accountability partner. Or the spouse wants to be the accountability partner.
Okay.
That, I've never seen that work out well. Not saying it won't. I'm just saying I have not witnessed it, because at some point what happens is the one who's viewing the pornography or breaching the trust in whatever way, they feel like, when does the inquisition take place today? When's the next inquisition? So there's this dread of interaction. And
you can't have that dread. That's not healthy.
Right, because then you come down to this choice of, am I going to be honest or am I going to lie?
Right.
And how far can I go before I do have to be honest?
And just dealing with some of these people too, some of their gut reactions or their defense mechanism is to outright lie.
And then circle back and be honest.
Yes, which destroys trust again.
Even more.
Yep.
Right.
Yes.
So that's such a good tip. So what tools, maybe practical tools, do you suggest, and how do they set up accountability?
Okay. So
and why are you choosing accountability?
Yes, for accountability, I don't think anyone ever succeeds alone. Number one, so I think accountability is absolutely one of the most vital things. I encourage couples to find someone that they mutually trust, and that person become the accountability partner, for them to meet together with that person and say, this is what accountability is going to look like. If you do this, if you do this, or you do this, this is when you call and reach out to them, or I'll reach out to you. Here are the questions that we think need to be asked.
Okay.
And then the partner who's the trust has been broken to. So the one that's the victim of the breach in trust. They have the right and the privilege at any point to contact the accountability partner and say, hey, is my spouse following through?
Okay.
Is there anything I need to know?
Okay.
That way, they're not blindsided 6 months later because their spouse got tired of being questioned intensely. And the other part that I don't want to leave out is the negative part for the one being the accountability partner in the marriage is the relationship is they just start hearing all the times their spouse or partner is struggling. So eventually all you can think is like, oh my goodness, all they do is struggle. Like everything is sexualized. Like can he or she look at another person and like it just becomes like this thing they can't get away from. And that's not the reality. It's just become the central focal point of conversation. And so we don't need that we need healing and how do we repair, not let's just kind of soak and marinate in all of the struggles.
It kind of goes back to like whatever you focus on is magnified.
Yes.
So if all we talk about is that breach, then of course it's going to be magnified, and that's of course not a good plan.
No, it just builds, and so it frees the one that is trying to be the accountability partner to say, you know what, someone I trust is fulfilling this role, and I have permission to call this person and say, is there anything I need to know? Is he or she actually following through? And I trust that they're going to tell me the truth. And that's why the mutual trust is so picking someone that both people feel equally trusting of. That I can be really vulnerable and say, this is what I'm doing, this is how I'm behaving, this is what I'm struggling with in my thought life. And the other person can call and know that they're going to get the true side of the story.
That's good.
It's a really good thing. There are all the basic things too of like putting covenant eyes on devices. I've had couples where we've taken the ability to download apps off of their phone, and I would have to be the one that adds it back. One thing I always focus on is what we're going to do sustainable. And sustainable, we need to set kind of like what do we look at here? So yes, we may need a season where we take the ability to download apps off the phone or take social media off of the phone, cut it out of our lives. That's probably not sustainable forever.
Right.
So when are we going to circle back and reevaluate this? Becomes so important of what is necessary to start building the foundation is likely going to evolve and it needs to be revisited. Or else there's just going to be like this kind of resentment that grows.
And when say that the person that broke trust is more likely to agree to have all this stuff put on their phone and to the accountability if they know that this is for a season, then we'll revisit it. If they still feel like we need it, then we'll keep it. And I'm hearing a lot of this really applies. It's not just pornography, but it is for an affair or breaking trust in that way too. I don't know if you want to kind of steer us in a different direction, but we can go into like what are the steps for seeking forgiveness and healing.
That'd be great. I think that's a good transition because that was probably the most common question is how do I actually forgive and build trust again, and how are those two things different?
So forgiving, I think probably the most distorted, I'm trying to get all of my words correct here, misconception, wrong perception, whatever it is that we have is that I need to forgive you like for you. When the reality is forgiveness is for me. It's not for you. It's not to make you feel better about you doing something wrong to me. I'm forgiving so I can move forward. Building trust is the work you do to prove to me that we're back on the right track. And so those, to me, that's a good
distinction.
That's how it differs. I think one of the most powerful things is I'm working with a couple, and recently she wrote a note to him and said, I am aware that forgiveness is more about me than you. And so right now, it's just words. I reread it right before I came. She said, right now it's just words and I don't feel this way. But I am telling you that today I choose to forgive you. And tomorrow I will ask the Lord to help me forgive you again. And I will keep asking this until my feelings catch up with my actions.
That's so beautiful.
Wow.
And it's been so beautiful to watch what's happened in their relationship because she's truly realized, like, for me to function, for me to be okay and have breathing room, I've got to get up and release this every day.
Yeah.
And then I can also say he's really doing the work of the behavioral part, the accountability part, the trustworthiness. He's doing all of that too. But she's actually engaging in it. And from a biblical perspective, I think we somewhere got this idea that it's a one time I'm going to have like this really great spiritual encounter, a really deep prayer meeting, and like forgive and let it go, and then it's gone. And that's really, it's
and
not,
forgotten.
which is a whole different topic, forgetting in addition to forgiving. But it's a whole different thing of, in the Lord's Prayer even, he says, give us this day our daily bread, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those that trespass against us. He tied forgiveness right along with seeking for daily provision. So he's like, every time you pray, every day when you seek for provision, you also seek for forgiveness. You seek for searching out who do you need to go ask for forgiveness from.
It's like cleaning your slate.
Yeah.
Almost, like.
That's so good.
And he made the assumption in that prayer when he laid it out and twice in Scripture that like it's a daily thing. It's not a one and done thing that we just do it and wrap it up.
I love that perspective because I think so often we tend to focus on the Scripture that says, you know, you need to forgive 7 times a day, which means it's just instant, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of the emphasis we make on it is just forgive. You got to forgive. But when you say...
And don't ever revisit it again. Just it's gone.
Right. But when you say, no, this is part of the Lord's Prayer, it's tied to give us this day our daily bread.
Yeah.
And forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Forgive our trespasses as we forgive those that trespass against us. It's saying, I got to come back to this every day because I'm fallen, I'm human. Just as much as I need bread and provision, I need to go through this process of forgiveness.
I need to look at it every day.
Yeah.
And it even goes along, there's so many broader implications as well, because we also believe that, like, yes, we're forgiven of our sins when we repent, but then we also teach consistently, hey, if you mess up, ask the Lord to forgive you and get up and keep going. We believe in the process of seeking forgiveness over and over and over again. And then when it comes to this issue, it's like that goes out the window and it's like, no, just forgive me once and we're good.
We're done.
We're done. And then the one who has broken the trust so often wants to lean into, you're not forgiving me.
Yeah. Talk about that, because that came up quite a bit as well.
Yeah. So this is a touchy thing that takes a little bit to get there when I'm actually working with a couple, but I'm sure this exists out there. I try not to make blanket statements. I can say from my experience, I've never worked with a couple that by the time we got to a point that like actual infidelity took place, that there weren't a lot of cracks in the foundation.
The fissures. Like
the fissures that I was talking about. So there's a lot of that there. It doesn't matter if it's 1 or 100. Those things will never add up to the breach of trust that an actual affair.
And the cracks in the foundation, you're talking about like communication problems.
Problems, not prioritizing one another.
No dates.
Drifting apart, intentionally hurting one another or unintentionally hurting.
Poking and criticism. And
never meeting expectations, all these things. So there's already so many things that are going on. And so by the time they get there, we do have to address that. But then how do we circle back? Because I think what happens most of the time that I see is the couple comes in, the one who trust was broken to is saying, I can't get beyond this. This is so major.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty strong on wanting the person who breaks the trust to be able to, with no qualifications on, I stepped outside of our vows. Like, I made the decision, you experienced the same hurts, the cracks in the foundation that I did, and you didn't make that decision. I made that decision.
Right.
And so someone made a decision to go like kind of the ultimate step outside of the boundaries.
Sure.
And what happens is we get so caught up in focusing on the one that's been hurt that we do this automatic defense thing of like, I don't want to be the terrible human being. And most people don't have a problem saying, yeah, I did that, but what about this, and this?
Right.
And so it's being able to circle back around and say, okay, let's start with take responsibility for your behaviors. Let's really get that solid apology in there. That's important, that you say, I am sorry without qualifications. I am sorry. I apologize for the hurt. And then as we move forward, how do we come back around and start addressing these other things that helped kind of create the perfect storm for whatever happened? And again, I know there will be exceptions to that, but it's one of those things too of communication is such a key part of this. Of see couples all the time where the one that's been hurt, they decide, hey, we're going to communicate better, and so the one that broke the vows comes and says, hey, I'm struggling. I wanted to look at pornography today. Someone texted me, I responded, whatever the case may be. And then the one that's been hurt really responds aggressively and angrily, which would be natural. It's normal. It makes you 100% human is all that does. It also sends the message that, like, you tell me that you want me to share, you tell me you want me to be vulnerable.
But it's not safe.
But it's not safe, so what about this makes me think the next time I come back that this is a safe place for me to really be honest.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it's just sitting. This is a little cheesy, but I encourage couples to have their most difficult conversations in public spaces.
Yeah.
I encourage them to go to coffee shops, places where other people will be in close proximity, because we're much less likely to become emotionally dysregulated and get into heated conversations and say things we regret if people are around us and can see us. We're going to fall into our social norms.
Okay.
And it's going to help us listen better, because we realize I can't just fly off the handle and start yelling or storm off to the bedroom and slam the door. Like, I can't go get in the car and drive away.
Everybody has the decision to keep a lid on it.
They do. Right. And we can do that in public. We've proven that over and over. I mean, how many times do we find out people get to us and they've been having affairs, multiple affairs or an ongoing affair, and everyone's known about it in the house, like the spouse, the couple, they've known about it, and it just got to the point where they had to get some of the pressure off. But they've gone to church, they've gone to their friend group, their small groups, work, and no one has a clue. We can keep a lid on it. And there's a part of this of like, we do need to change communication. We do need to be completely honest and vulnerable. And we don't need to do damage that says it's not safe to work on this.
Right.
Yep.
So it's maintaining safety.
Yes.
And trying not to make it worse.
Yes.
Because it can easily go way worse if it's allowed to.
Yeah. It really can.
Yeah.
And it's hard. It's super hard. So much of communication is cheesy. When you get right down to it, if you're going to communicate well, it's going to feel awkward.
Okay, so speaking of cheesy communication, I was just glancing down and reading a question that came in, and I think maybe the answer can have to do with cheesy communication tools. What are specific exercises to try with someone to build or rebuild trust?
The key thing is trust is rebuilt in small things that seem insignificant.
That's so beautiful.
Love that.
Yeah.
Write that down.
It is
really good.
If you say, I'm going to put gas in the car on the way home, and you don't, you have not kept your word. And if you're not keeping your word with the little things, how do I believe you're not looking at pornography? If you can't do something as simple as put gas in the car like you said you were going to, how do I even believe that you're not doing the big things?
Right.
Which gets into this, and you can derail me if you don't want to go down this rabbit trail about...
It's probably a good rabbit
Yeah,
trail.
go for it.
When it comes to the accountability process and rebuilding trust, it's going to feel restrictive. It's going to feel demeaning. It's going to like push against everything within us as humans that don't want to be monitored. But that's part of the consequences of breaking trust. But what I try to get couples to see is if you will just make the investment, think about your paycheck and retirement. Yeah, you could have more that you bring home that you could spend, but the investment in the end is going to be so worth what you deal with now. If you'll do these consequences well,
Yeah.
the payoff is going to be so rewarding
Yes.
when we get down the road. And
Yep.
so if you say you're going to gas up the car, gas up the car. If you say you're going to take out the trash, take out the trash. If you say you're going to do whatever,
Yeah.
do it.
So you're saying people need to be mindful.
Yes, very mindful of
It's-
small things.
Yeah.
And even asking their spouse on a daily basis, like, how can I be helpful to you?
Yeah.
And then fulfilling that, whatever it is.
I'm really big, and the cheesy communication thing is state your expectations. What do you mean? So if you say, I just need to be able to trust you, I always want to know what does define trust for me. And then tell him or her what you mean. What can they do to demonstrate they're building what you're looking for?
Yeah.
Because it is impossible to hit a moving target.
Right.
Yeah.
That's so good.
That's
And it's
true.
doing. One of our favorite things to say is that, frustration, whenever there's frustration in the marriage, it's the result of unmet or uncommunicated expectations.
Yes.
So, and you said that was so good, saying that what can they do? That's a very, it's a do. It's not just
Yeah.
a random, just please be more mindful. What does that look like?
Yeah. Be mindful about what? What am I doing that indicates I'm not trustworthy?
Yes.
Because I can do something about that, but I can't pass invisible tests I don't know about.
Yes. Yeah. Invisible tests. That's good.
That's so good. And sometimes too, I think people are, they've been going along this maybe for 10 years.
Yeah.
There's no communication. There's so much crud built up in the
Yes.
relationship. And maybe if we gave their relationship a number, it'd be at a 4, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes I like to tell people, well, instead of expecting a 10 and communicating everything, why don't we shoot for maybe a 4.5 or a 5?
Yeah.
And just what is that one little mindful thing that you could do to kind of step us one step in the right direction?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because that invisible test is going to look different for everyone.
Yeah.
So define what a 4 or 5 looks like
Yeah.
when I can trust you at that level. Maybe it's picking up your clothes when you said you were going to pick them up.
Yes.
Something as simple as that.
It really is.
Yeah.
And I think the thing is, how do we do this when we lose the urgency of salvaging the relationship? Because typically when people first come in and disclosures first happen or being caught has first happened, they're on this thing of, I'll do anything. You tell me, I'm willing to do it forever. That lasts a few weeks, and then it's this is not fun, and I don't know that I'm signed on to do this forever.
Yeah.
And so,
Share about that client you were telling us about earlier today.
remind me which one.
The one that said I'm willing to do anything.
So he was like, I'm willing to do anything. There's nothing I won't do. And started off really, really engaged in that
You're
process.
awesome, okay.
Just going above and beyond. And I was waiting on the sustainability factor
Yes.
to kick in. And then he called, and the spouse wanted Life 360, which is a tracking app that shows where you're at all times. And his response was I'm not going to be a dog on a leash. And my response was, okay, your message till now has been, I'll do anything. And we've just changed the message to, I'll do anything, but let you see where I'm at.
Yeah.
And if you want that to be your boundary, that's okay. However, up till now you've been saying, I'll do anything. So I just need you to clarify with your spouse,
Yes.
are you going to do anything? Are you going to do anything but? And then she has the option of being okay with that or not being okay with that. And you've got to assess if you're okay with her not being all right with you doing everything but.
That's good. Yeah.
And that's so difficult as the hurt spouse, hearing that, I'll do anything but okay.
Yeah.
That
Because the wall's going to go up immediately.
Right. Well, because if you're not willing to be transparent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, transparency, that word right there, I do encourage to use I'll do anything but give you all the nitty-gritty details.
Yeah. That's so
you
important.
You might talk about that. That's right.
I don't think I've ever seen that work out well.
Why is that?
It's too much information. Once the picture and the narrative is out there in the other person's mind, you can't undo it. And so it then changes. It gets too granular, and so
the consequences are not worth knowing.
Truly, they're not. Because it becomes something. There are no winners in that. The one that hears it doesn't gain anything by having that knowledge. It just creates the anxiety and the brain not being able to shut off all of the thoughts, and then the consequences that come out of that. There's so much more anger that the consequences typically tend to come up to a level that's not sustainable for anyone.
And could you possibly also be giving more triggers, right?
Yeah.
So, we were here and there and there and there.
Yes.
So we can't go there anymore because I now have an image of you here with someone that's not me.
That is exactly what happens is you start limiting restaurants where you can shop, where you can go hang out, and all of a sudden you can't do anything. I was working with a couple a while back that we've eliminated being able to go to the mountains. We've eliminated being able to go to the beach. And it's
so hard.
Where are you going to go?
Yeah.
Are you just going to go to urban areas where there is no water and no mountain ranges because it's triggering?
Yeah.
But if you keep asking for details, we're eventually going to be able to say, okay, you can stay in your house because it's the only place that wasn't violated.
Sure. And if that's the case.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so you don't want that to be a thing because in this case, the one that had been hurt was saying, I feel really sad that we've lost the ability to go to the beach. And I'd been begging, please stop with this granular
the curiosity.
Yes.
So this is kind of a part of the process toward healing.
Yeah.
You want us go back to some of those steps that we had down, or do we
Yeah.
have those?
We have if you want more on this concept of the questions that people will ask, and that the detailed curiosity questions that people will ask that may not be healthy to know the answers to, you can check out our IGTV because there's a whole video on that. And it is one of those steps for healing.
Also on our counseling page, there's a free PDF that we've created with some more information that will be in some follow-up emails. So if you want
on the how.
on the how-to part.
This question came in. I wanted to ask you because you mentioned forgiving daily. And this person said, if we're going to forgive daily, which I agree must be done, then I feel the other person must say sorry daily. Is that just me? They said. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Again, forgiveness is if I need to forgive someone, that's for me. I think that gets into what are we hoping to exact? What's the end goal of what are you wanting to hear? I think I don't hear that I want to hear I'm sorry from the person. I'm wondering what that individual wants to hear. So what's the question behind the question would be there. It's you're saying you want the person to say they're sorry, but what are you really wanting to know? Are you wanting to know that they're still here? Do you need reassurance?
I think that's the key.
And so that's one of the things I actually encourage people to do, and that I had written down is I encourage people to figure out a time 2 to 3 times a week, never go longer than a week, without sitting down and saying, where are we?
Yeah, that's good. A check-in.
Just a check-in, like and use feeling words. Don't get caught up in specifics of, well, you did this on Tuesday and this on Thursday, but like, this has been a tough week. I felt really insecure this week. Is there anything I can do that would help you feel less insecure? And set those expectations. What can I do? Where are you? What can I do? And then also, we lose sight of this. I had a friend that had an affair, and he remembers having a really difficult conversation where his wife had really just said something cutting to him, and it was probably 6 or 7 months after the affair. And up to that point, he said that he had like allowed the anger to come out, and he said he thought about it and he went in. He was very, he did it really, really well. But he said, "Hey, I totally understand you being angry, but I need you to understand that I still have feelings. And while what you said was on point, and I didn't keep my word in this area, the way you said it was like really, really hurtful. And can we figure out a way to communicate around this differently?" And I think that's really key, is how do we talk to each other?
So good.
And how do we communicate those things? What do we need? What are we actually needing? Because if the person has said, "I'm sorry," once, is them saying, "I'm sorry" again what we need to hear, or do we need to hear them say, "I'm here"?
Yeah, that's good.
I think that's the key thing, is figure out what are we really, really looking for.
Yeah. Because them saying sorry may not be that meaningful on the daily.
Yeah.
Right?
And so I ask clients a lot of times to do this little exercise of fill in the blank. I need to hear you say fill in the blank. And I have them try to slow down and think, what do I need them to say? What do I need to hear? To help me be okay.
That's really good.
It's because it seems like a lot of times when we haven't located that need, what we do is we poke for it, right? Like, it's like, are you still there? And we're just jabbing, and we just want a reaction. And it's normally not what they want to hear. It's more of like, and they're doing like a touch, but generally it's kind of in a critical or,
it's,
you know what I'm saying? And the hurt, I think the hurt partner too, you said something a little bit ago, the hurt partner sometimes feels justified. Like that justice, like I feel angry and I feel justified to be angry, and I'm going to be angry.
And the thing is, there's truth to that. Like being angry, being hurt, there is truth to that. I think when we get into consequences, that word is a tricky word, because consequences are, to me, associated with rebuilding trust. That means I'm going to be confined in some things. I'm going to have to step up and meet some expectations. Consequences are different than exacting justice on someone or getting even with someone. And so you have to examine what you're doing. If you are the person who has been hurt, am I having reasonable consequences where it's totally reasonable that I don't want you on Facebook because you were communicating with your boyfriend or girlfriend from 15 years ago and sending pictures? It's 100% reasonable that I don't want you there. That's different than
trying to hurt them,
like
hurting you.
What are all the things I can do to restrict your life and make it miserable because you hurt me? One of those is a very reasonable consequence. It's very constraining, restraining. We lose autonomy to a degree. Those are consequences.
And it's a healthy boundary setting.
It is. And they're not fun to have, but they're necessary if we're going to rebuild the trust. But again, it's totally different than me just thinking about, okay, what all can I get out of this person?
Right.
To make them regret they did what they did.
Yeah. It's like seeking revenge. And actually one of the places we like to go with couples when we're working on rebuilding trust is releasing that right to get even.
Yes.
You know, and that's part of forgiveness, is letting that right to get even go. Because you can't ever even the scales.
Yeah, it won't happen.
No.
And I think that's why a lot of people drag stuff out. they don't want to say sorry with that other frame of like, that saying I forgive you is like a momentous occasion. They don't do it, and they push it out as far as they can because I need to make sure that you don't do this on me again.
Yeah.
And this is the rebuilding trust, but it's kind of a distorted way, right? Like I'm gonna make it hurt so bad that you never want to cheat on me again.
Yeah. And that's not rebuilding trust. That's exacting revenge.
This is a good question. This person said, how can I help my spouse to forgive themselves? Or how can my husband forgive himself? So assuming that they're working through the forgiveness,
right.
And maybe she has forgiven him, but how can he forgive himself?
Again, super tough question. It goes back to what do we need to hear? Does he need to hear? I'm just going to make assumptions. It's a he, she thing.
Sure.
So what does he need to hear? That like, I'm still here. I haven't changed my mind. I've still forgiven you. I'm not leaving. I love you. I think the reassurance goes both ways. Yeah. Like, I'm not leaving. Yeah. I'm still not leaving. Which seems really counterintuitive. And I know if anyone's listening out there and you're recently hurt, that you can't imagine, and this sounds offensive for me to say, that like at some point you'll probably be in this role of telling the one who hurt you of reassuring them. But that's not uncommon when someone has truly taken ownership and they feel the full weight of their choices and the guilt of it, and the shame of it, to really, really struggle with like believing that you can forgive and that you really will stay, and that I'm not on the brink of coming home and you not being there. Yeah. And so that gets into like, again, communication. And I am really big, I do want to throw this in here. Yeah. Communicate in a way that works for you. And most of the ways that work for people in real life don't ever show up in books or in the literature. Like, I am terrible about, I don't give direct answers. If you ask me, are you going home from California? I'll say, at some point. Like, I'm never just going to say, like, yes, Saturday, 12:30. And so I kind of like hedge around everything. And the more you ask me direct questions, the more I shut down. So when we get to like question 4, like, I'm completely zoned out. And we have this running joke. My wife would not care that I share this. She can ask 20 questions in under 30 seconds.
That's pretty good.
And I mean, it is like just boom, boom, boom. And I shut down. She needs to know the information. I've been in grad school forever. And so we're very busy. We have 2 teenagers. She needs the information. As a responsible adult, I need to give her the information. We came up with this super cheesy thing of she emails me. Nice. And I have 48 hours to respond. So we have, but it's time limited of like, I have to be accountable. In 48 hours, I'm going to respond, and I can do it via text, email, or face-to-face, and I can do it either answer everything at once or as I settle on my answers. It took so much strain out of our communication when we figured out a way that worked for us.
And that may not work for everyone, but that works super well for you.
Absolutely. I have a couple I worked with. They do this really great thing of they go to work and get off work at different times. And so if there's been conflict, they leave a note under the coffee maker. And the other one responds and leaves their note under the coffee maker. That's so the other one comes home. That's and great. So everybody has time to kind of emotionally regulate to what they've read before they actually see each other face to face.
That's really cool.
And then they're prepared going in.
Yes, they know, like, this is what we need to talk about. I'm really angry when I see it at the moment, or I'm really hurt. But 8 hours later, I've absorbed it. The other partner that comes home, when they read the note, they have a couple of hours to absorb the response. And so when the two meet face to face, it works for them.
That's good.
That's so good.
I'm looking at this. We have 15 seconds remaining. We will address any of the questions or topics that didn't get addressed in posts in the coming week or two. And we'll also post information for connecting with Dr. Mills and further resources. So thank you for tuning in.
Thank you.